Hello everybody. It's great to be able to have this privilege again to share some things from God's Word with you in these continuing difficult times. I think probably all of us have had to make not just one but a number of sacrifices due to the COVID virus. Many things have been taken away from us, and that will continue for some time, it seems. Some of those things may be relatively trivial, such as not being able to get a latte in a coffee shop with some friends. Some of them have more significance. Cancelling a child's birthday party does matter. We've perhaps not been able to enjoy the holidays that we would have done otherwise. Some events have been cancelled or had major amendments. Schooling for our children has been impacted. Some have lost their jobs, and there may be more at risk still. Weddings have been postponed. Funerals have had restrictions on the number of mourners, which prevented people paying the respects that they would have shown. Sadly, some have passed away due to the virus itself. Plans for memorial services have been mooted, but the events still seem lost in the mists ahead. In our churches, our fellowship together has been impacted, and it's meant we've had to adopt technology to maintain contact. We're so grateful for that, but it's not the same as meeting face to face, is it? Even baptisms have been pushed back. Certainly a very significant thing for a while, and some of us are still in that situation, has been not able to have a remembrance on the Lord's Day. We were unable to access the holy place in corporate worship. That means God Himself has allowed Himself to be deprived of something that has been in place in recent times for over 120 years, if I may put it like that. One thing particularly that stands out in my mind that I missed during the summer was our South Wales Children's Summer Camp. It's the first time that I've missed it completely for ages and ages. I don't really want to have to calculate how many weeks of camps I've been to, but it is well more than a year of my life. It was a significant issue for me. I particularly missed the way the children enjoy their singing and watching that. It's quite easy to get children to sing action songs as they have fun while doing it. It's quite a loss not to see it. Thankfully, I've got some videos from previous years that I can enjoy. And there's one action song I wanted to share with you today. I'm certainly not going to subject you to my warbling, so don't worry about that. I'll show you it on a video in a minute. And I'm not brilliant at the actions, but I wanted you to know the words, which I will show you with my version of the actions. Lots of you know it already, of course. It's 12 men went to spy in Canaan. 10 were bad and 2 were good. What did they find to spy in Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. Some saw giants, great and tall. Some saw grapes in clusters fall. Some saw God was in it all. 10 were bad and 2 were good. In camp, we maybe sing it 5 or 6 times through, each time faster than the previous one. So the challenge is to fit those actions into that time. Here it is on the 4th time through. It's quite quick. Now, of course, that song is referring to an experience in the wilderness of the people of Israel, maybe a year or so after they've left Egypt. They're on the brink of experiencing possession of the land they've been promised by God. And 12 men are chosen to do a reconnaissance of Canaan and make a report of what they've seen. The story is well known, but let's refresh our memories on some parts of it. It's in Numbers 13. I'm starting at verse 1, but we'll only pick out parts of the events recorded. Take time, though, to refresh your mind later, through to the end of chapter 14, because it is mind-blowing what happens. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe send one of its leaders." So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. There then follows a record of the names of the men and which tribes they led. Then Moses sent them to explore Canaan. He said, "Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly, and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account: "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there." Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. That night all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land, only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt." Joshua and Caleb said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." And we'll leave it there on the edge of the precipice, and I just pass a couple of comments for us to consider. The last verse underlines the strongest point of that song the kids sing. "Some saw God was in it all." These were leaders, chosen, and their names noted. God keeps records in his books, and here we can see that. The 10 leaders who suggested the return to Egypt strategy should have been men of faith and trustworthy. How different their outlook to Caleb and Joshua. You might have noticed that Moses spells out their task with very specific detail and some questions to answer. Was Moses worried about what they would meet in the land? I suggest not at all. He knew that the Lord had brought them to this place for entry into the land he had promised them. Moses was surely ascertaining what preparations would need to be made, which God does expect us to do about tasks. Just make sure we ask for his guidance too. The report given is accurate and starts in an encouraging way, backed up with the physical evidence of the grapes. And then comes the but. In English, the use of the word but in such contexts changes the focus completely. Very often the good news is undermined by the "but here is the bad news." The listener's attention is drawn towards the emphasized bad news. Here, it is the giants. They'll have to be overcome. But they might not be. And obviously it's left out there for the people to see if they have the stomach for that. I let my mind imagine how all this came about. 40 days of research, opinions being expressed initially by the more vocal men, drawing the party into two views. Joshua and Caleb trying to push back against the negative tide. The protagonists working together, hushed whispers, working through a presentation strategy to save their own skins. Keep the upside accurate but not overemphasized. Use language skills to leave the people in no doubt what our recommendations are. Allow it to sink in. Listen to the murmur rise to a louder chatter of discontent. Have some killer phrases ready, such as, "We seem like grasshoppers compared to them," for when our opponents object. Be ready to get the word around the people privately that this isn't a good idea. There are 10 of us, we can do that. It's so easy to get swept up in this sort of activity in assembly situations, isn't it? Today, I was reading in my Christianity magazine, other magazines are available, about an article about an employment dispute in a Christian charity. And it said, groupthink occurs when a coterie of well-intentioned people make irrational or even dysfunctional decisions driven by the urge to conform or the discouragement of dissent. This causes the group to minimize conflict and reach a consensus decision without critical evaluation. Groupthink requires individuals to avoid raising controversial issues or alternative solutions, to suppress individual creativity and independent thinking. In the interests of making a decision that furthers their group cause, ethical or moral consequences may be ignored. For the 10, the group, the die was cast. It was sin, and now was beyond control, and the impact was enormous. Maybe we don't face such major issues, but let's recognize influences we or others have and ensure they align with the Lord's purposes and will. Sometimes it's easy to have a bad effect upon the saints in the assembly. That can just be through body language, gestures, withdrawal, and so on. Why may that be sin for us? James 4:17 says, anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, sins. What the Lord had promised had been buried in their thinking, a disaster in itself. If we forget God's promises, we're likely to get into trouble. They painted a picture for the community they can't easily remove. Yes, there were giants, but they'd lost sight of God's plan for them in His goodness. We've got to be very careful when we put up our own judgments on things and we pass them on to others. We can create giants in their eyes, even though we may not realize we're doing that. COVID-19 is a new giant to us. Most of us have not passed this way before, and there's much speculation, rumour and regulation to comprehend. In fact, we are likely now to be fatigued just with the ever-changing situations. We do need, though, to investigate regulations carefully and examine the possibilities. It's all too easy not to check things out and then allow others to face isolation, for example, unnecessarily. In the UK, there is a focus on assisting vulnerable people, which by definition includes all those over 70. We certainly need to ensure that we don't spread despair, even accidentally. In fact, we need to spread hope, not based on a wish, but on a confidence in the care of God for us. Romans 28 was on the Golden Bells calendar recently, and the comment included, not every single circumstance of our lives will necessarily seem good, but under God's supreme control they will all work together for our benefit. But in return we need to love Him and trust Him. The bad report in Numbers 13 generates a negative reaction, though the people had probably been expectant before the 12 returned, and broadly positive therefore. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us die by the sword? They had all the promises of the Lord, and now they were saying, we want to go back to Egypt. Were their memories so poor? It would make me laugh if it hadn't been so serious, and the damage that came from it was significant. That's the impact that these men's report had. I have some understanding about what it must have been like for them to face that physical giant. When I was a boy, and being Welsh, playing rugby union in school was just what you did. It's a game where supersized physiques seem an advantage. Our team was relatively small in physical stature, and we'd often come up against quite significantly larger teams. When you watched them get off the bus or saw them walk on the pitch, you'd mentally measure yourselves against them. And it was always possible to think, we could be in trouble here. These are giants. But there was a skill in our team and a trust. And those two things worked together so that we ended up winning most of the games and nobody was seriously injured. Now that's just trusting in human skill and each other. The people of Israel and ourselves have the Lord on our side. They couldn't possibly have lost. Joshua and Caleb spelled that out to them. The giants would mean nothing, but disaster was lurking due to their faithlessness. You and I may face different giants, and they can seem overwhelming. I'd encourage you to look too at the blessings, look at the grapes that God gives, and remember to see that God is in it all. 40 years later on, the giants of the land capitulated easily. There's a lesson in that in itself, as they could have saved a lot of their travelling. David faced the giant Goliath. He was threatening and scaring God's people on a daily basis, a daily challenge to which they had no answer. But David was assured of God's presence and promise. He was the anointed king in waiting, so he knew subservience to the giant was not to be contemplated. David's strength was to come from the name of the Lord Almighty. I appreciate that the giants you may face are very real, and do not want to sound dismissive of them. The Lord Jesus himself was challenged by giants, of course, and Hebrews 12 verses 2 and 3 gives an insight to his handling of some of them. However you choose to deal with your giants, having the Lord's words and promises at the centre is vital. Joshua, Caleb and David attest to that. Finally, remember not to create giants for others to face. And remember the action I showed you. Some saw God was in it all. Be one of that some. Thank you.